Okay, yay! Thank you, Joe, for joining me in this interview. We're gonna keep getting better at these. So you are how many vibe camps have you been to?
Well, I guess three and a half if you count vibe clips. So, all
Whoa,
three of them, and then also the eclipse thing.
amazing!
Yeah.
And I recognize you as the mysterious fellow who's often off in a corner with a typewriter. Do you want to say a little bit about that, and then we'll go into
Yeah.
more stuff about your
Yeah.
history too. But
Yeah, sure. My first, I'll tell you about my experience at Vibecamp doing it, and then sort of where my own life started with that. Vibecamp 2 was when I first popped out, and I'd started to feel more comfortable at the event. Wanted to do my own thing that would be fun, and so it was after what in my mind is filed away as the David Lynch dating play. So it's like midnight or something, like super late at night. So it was, that kind of added to the element of mystery to it all. It's like everybody was either drunk or sleepy, and so I was in the liminal realms or whatever. But yeah, just it's a kind of old sort of busk now, weirdly enough. Although still many people have not heard of it. Called Poet for Hire. But you have a typewriter, and you're set up, and people come ask you what you're doing, and you say, it's a three-step process. This is how I was taught. Someone gives you a topic, and it could be long or short. The weirder the better, the more idiosyncratic the better. You usually have like a kind of conversation back and forth with the person. Then I'll write you this poem in 3 to 5 minutes. You hear it, and you pay whatever you think it's worth. That's how it is done out there in the wild, although it was free at Vibecamp. But yeah, judge away, decide if you like it or not, whatever. And it's just sort of this improvisational experience. But yeah, I started doing this. So I lived in New Orleans for a lot of the 2010s, and there's a big culture of it there. So I ran into a friend who was doing it, and just kind of was at a phase in my life where I was like, oh, I'll try anything, and so I came out, and for my first night I was hooked, and it was the only thing I wanted to do. I just fell head over heels in love with it. Couldn't get enough of it, and for about three and a half years or so, I was like a full-time poet for hire. Largely in New Orleans, although I like traveled and did like events and stuff, went up and down the East Coast a bunch, and hit a bunch of different places too.
that is amazing. I had no idea that was the backstory there. That's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a really interesting subculture. It's sort of a place that I think like its story, much like Vibe Camp or Teapot or whatever. It's this very curious subculture that's very much a product of our time. Whose like official story in the public record has yet to be told. So if
Yeah.
you're in the know, maybe you've heard about it, but otherwise, there's just all of these incredible stories about it waiting to be shared with the world on a wider scale.
Whew. And that actually that makes me kind of curious. I feel like, we'll get deeper into these things too, but I so one of the ways that I think about Teapot is like I've kind of described it to people before as like we're all the one weird kid from our hometown who kind of found each other online, and I don't think that's universally true of everybody, but I think there is a sense that you have to be kind of an oddball, an outcast in some form to
Yeah.
to really resonate with the scene. So what was your life path like that you think led you
Yeah.
to being the kind of person who would like come to Vibe Camp and hang out in the scene
Totally.
on Twitter?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge question. So I so yes, I was the weird kid, or one of the weird kids in my school and when I was growing up and stuff. I was in a lot of different places because I was in a military family. My dad was in the Navy, so we bounced from school to school for a lot of middle school and some of high school and stuff. So yeah, it was just sort of there's like a bottom alienation level that just kind of stays there as a young person. Um, and then, honestly, my story was quite similar to yours, Brooke, and I feel I felt welcome in this scene as someone who has kind of fallen through the cracks of society and then climbed back up into society, and now I'm in like a happy, weird little society. And I've always felt kind of, at least not by all people in Teapot necessarily. I don't even know them all, but by my little tribe and by the main people who run the events and stuff, I've always felt very welcome and like I belonged. But yeah, so I went to college, like one does. I remember this is actually interesting, and I felt this kind of like resonance with a lot of people in Teapot. But I was studying philosophy. I was very very passionately invested in philosophy. I wanted to be a professor, write books, write papers, talk at conferences. That was all I wanted to do. Then I had a very transformative mushroom experience when I was like,
I was waiting for you to say ayahuasca,
you knew it was
but
coming. Yeah, everybody knows it's coming, right? So I mean, yeah, if you just selected for that out of everybody, I think you get pretty far on the scene. Um, but yeah, just immediately it was like night and day. It was like, before then I saw the picture of like an academic journal. I got fired up and hot and ready to read. And then the next day, like just I came back from spring break and then it was like, oh, fluorescent blue lights, windowless classroom, get me out of here. So I dropped out, started traveling, and eventually, what had happened. So it took me a while to get to school. Grew up with drugs around and had my own struggles with substance abuse and stuff, and it was just a hard time kind of getting out into the world. And so around the time I graduated school, it took a while after I had like, tried various traveling adventures, tried hopping a train, tried, just like vagabonding for a while. It was all still not finding my fit. And then I eventually, so when I graduated, my buddy had bought a school bus and had renovated it to be kind of like an RV or whatever, and was riding down from where we were in Virginia to New Orleans, where he had some family, and we were just going to camp out in the school bus. And he was like, "Hey, you want to come?" And I was like, "Fuck it, let's go." So that kind of defined the next 15 years of my life or so.
wow.
Um, and so I did some different things. I worked in schools as an after school program mentor, strangely enough, for how wild things were. But yeah, mentored first generation college students for a while, which was really cool. And then eventually just kind of felt the call to sort of keep pushing myself and going out into the world. But I kind of vagabonded into San Francisco for a while. Crash landed first at a Zen Buddhist monastery where I stayed for a while. I was the pool boy, and and then uh, and that's a whole other thing. But yeah, Asahara Pool Boy 2014. If you don't know me from anything else, but yeah, I left there and kind of crash landed in San Francisco. A lot of my friends in New Orleans were, you know, in polite society you call them vagabonds. In less polite society you say they were like kind of oogly. I had some oogle buddies, and so like I had this image in my head of like what it would be like to try and rough it out and not know where I was going to stay and just like experiment with sleeping outside and trying the rough life in SF because I wanted to see if I could handle it and I wanted to sort of had some ridiculous, very dumb idea of like a mendicant monk type person, finding myself and
Yeah.
my spiritual truth through this. And of course, reality is often quite different, especially in that world. But yeah, had a wild, year and a half, 2 years in San Francisco. Grateful to have learned about it and definitely don't regret the experience at all. But yeah, and then shortly after that, it feels nice to let all this out. But yeah, shortly after that, I came back to New Orleans, and that's when I got introduced to typewriter poetry. So it was like I'd spent, this chunk of a decade like amassing things I wanted to write about, and then all of a sudden I had this opportunity to just sit down and let the public come, push a button on me and I would, create writing for them. And it was just this tremendous experience just every night, getting to say something that could make like some random fleeting deep connection with a person, sometimes very, very deep, sometimes just funny and entertaining. Um, but yeah, that sort of like turned me into like a bit of a writer, I found my voice through that. Um, and then when like around 2019 or so, I met my partner writing poetry, and
Oh.
she and I both got sober together and moved out of New Orleans and kind of built our life together. And right when we were starting to try and figure out how we were going to do that is when COVID hit, and so I had been trying to hack it as like a freelance writer, and I had just started to like break into a few little magazine articles and stuff. I was starting to feel like maybe I could make it, although it was so hard to make a living. And then I ended up writing uh, making this WordPress site for my fellow street performers and poets for hire, who, like, the tourism industry evaporated kind of overnight when COVID hit, and so they were out of luck. You really live hand to mouth doing that, so they didn't have anything. So I made this WordPress, like, blog magazine site where people could, like, tip them money for the things they wrote, and it was just like live from New Orleans, COVID ground zero, and then eventually it became this big lit mag thing. But anyway, long story short, I got into computers through that, and sort of fell into tech world, and so how I ended up in Teapot. Sorry, I'm going on so long.
No, this is amazing. Keep going.
Cool. I don't know if I was going too much. But yeah, so I had gotten the computer bug, and I was trying to, like, build up this portfolio, and I came across this very interesting app and scene behind the app, this note-taking app called Rome Research, which has, I think, a small role to play in the origin stories of where I stood viewing, like, the genesis of Teapot 2019-2020. But there was a hackathon that they had sponsored, and it was called Interhacked, and it was a design-a-thon, which meant, like, you didn't have to know how to code or be very good at coding, but just, like, create things. And it was sort of like around this idea of like the future of how humans and computers relate, and, like, the ideas behind Rome Research, which were, like, creating this sort of network graph of information in your mind, and sort of, like, melding with the machine in all these interesting ways. So I went to that hackathon, right? And we were in the Discord, and I had this wonderful, creative, exhilarating time. I made this weird little, like, Figma prototype for something called the Glass Bead game. It was just kind of like a far out art project, and I had a lot of fun. But I met this fellow there who his way of talking and joking was really similar to mine, a little more rough around the edges than your average person who's been in tech their whole life. So I liked his sense of humor. We kind of hit it off, and he was working on this rubber duck chatbot. And kind of lit up the entire chat with this deranged, quacking chatbot at everyone. And I was like, "What's the deal? This guy's very interesting and fun to be around." And so I'd kind of been lurking on Twitter before that hackathon, but once me and this person who's Deep Fates, as many know him,
And the duck is.
And Burduck is the name of the duck. Exists sometimes on Twitter, sometimes on Blue Sky. Sometimes it wakes up. For now, the monster is sleeping. But yeah, we got in a group chat, and just we've been in one form or another of that group chat, which now spans to many different group chats and big friend groups since early 2021, I guess. And so every day, I'm talking to people in that scene who are all really familiar with Teapot and everything like it. So that's kind of my story from there to here.
Wow. Yeah, you answered some questions I was planning on asking later.
Yeah.
But just as a sort of an aside, I think so I was telling Joe before this call started that I've been sort of I lost us a lot of money on our last event, School for the Socially Inept, like 17K just on the venue, not including labor. And that's a huge amount of money for where we are right now. And so we are kind of like have been perpetually kind of out of runway. And I hate the feeling of like, I'm responsible. I've got a couple people who are, this is their job, and I'm responsible for them making money and all these things. And so, we've been trying to sell a few more tickets, even though we're kind of far out from the event. So, and I've been dealing with this sense of, like, I don't want to have to try to like market. I want to like make content because it's fun. And I realized while you were talking that this is how I can make it a lot more fun is sort of like when I go to these events, I've started getting pretty protective of my energy just because there's so many people and it's a little bit of a weird dynamic because like everybody at Vibecamp kind of knows who I am, or most people do. And so I tend to, I'll spend the most time around the volunteers or people who are working on the event, and then people who I already know. And I'm working on branching that out. And I have this sort of like vague abstract idea that like everyone who comes to Vibecamp is like pretty cool. And I don't have time to meet all of them. And so this is like a great way for me to hear about some people's backstories because I had no idea about any of that. And it's super cool. And I'm renewed in my excitement about doing more of these. And it also gives other people a chance to like meet some of the attendees. So maybe I can start calling these just like meet the Vibecampers or something for the video series.
Yeah, I think that would be amazing. I mean, I would enthusiastically watch other people's origin stories too, for sure. I think that's a good.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the first couple that I did, I was just so in the ask questions about Vibecamp and Teapot mode. It was the one just before this one. I was like, oh gosh, I should use this as a chance to like have people talk about their own lives. So I feel kind of bad for the first couple of people, but now that we've got it, I'm gonna keep doing this. This is really cool.
Yeah.
You have clearly lived many lives.
Yeah. Yeah. How did I get here? And yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm kind of curious. This is something I've been asking everybody, just because everybody kind of has a different answer to it. What is Vibecamp? If you were to like
Oh yeah.
go, how do you describe it to somebody who's maybe not on Twitter, who's never heard of it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I was writing your blurb for the interview that we did, and so I was faced with the same problem. And I think what I did was I called it a festival slash unconference. That would be the two. If I could pick two words, it would probably be that.
Hmm.
So yeah, there's like it's kind of a brainy party or a like party-ish salon. It's like it blends sort of like thinking and non-thinking fun having into this one thing. But yeah, it's there's a lot to it. I think it's like very much not a spectator sport. So it's sort of like Burning Man without a thing to burn, or like it's not it's less involved. It's also like a sort of high school reunion if Twitter was high school, or you can kind of come back together with people that you may have only known online. But yeah, I don't know. It defies it defies explanation. Like I've had three pretty remarkably different vibe camps. I say I would have like the first one to the second one to the third one were each also like pretty discrete different experiences too. So it's something that like your task with participating in definitely evolves over time. But yeah, it's sort of like a pop-up salon party type thing is what I would try to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's funny from even from the inside perspective, all of the vibe camps have been very different. The
Hmm.
first one was like, whoa, holy shit, what are we doing here? And there was a sense of kind of it was very thrilling. It was very like there was a sense of like this is something very new, and of course that's not gonna everybody. I think it was a contributing factor in a lot of people from the broader scene meeting each other in person a lot more. So it was less of the. I remember just the first one, just you hear screams off in the distance as people like realize that somebody was somebody they'd been friends with on the internet for years and had never met before.
Yeah.
And so, of course, you're going to get less of that. The second one, I think, because so many people had been expecting the first one to go horribly and then it didn't, then we kind of had this hype bubble and it got probably bigger than we were prepared to handle,
Hmm.
and was very high, like just high highs and low lows, I think, for a lot of people. Sometimes multiple of those in the same day.
Totally.
And then but this year, I feel, well, we'll have to, or 2023, 24. We're in
Hmm.
2025 now. So 2024 felt a lot more like, it was different than the first 2 years from my perspective, but it also felt like maybe this is what it's going to keep being. It felt a
Hmm.
lot sort of more stable to me. It
Yeah.
felt a lot more like people are kind of like more comfortable with each other. People, there's a bunch of people now who've been to a bunch of events. They're starting to like get a sense of it. And also, I think the people who, because we didn't know what it was to begin with. We're just like, let's everybody get together, and everybody got together, and that is kind of everybody, and not everybody's going to really vibe together. And so I think we're slowly getting a stronger sense of identity as an event and community, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
And I think also some people are weeding themselves out who are maybe like not the best vibe fit with that. So it'd be interesting to see how 2025 goes.
For sure. Yeah, I felt the steady energy myself for sure. It just kind of rolled right through, and yeah, it was. So maybe you'd be interested in hearing my experience, like of the three and a
Yeah.
half events, because it was definitely like a progression for me. I remember actually, I wanted to say this to you. So I believe it was at Vibe Clips that the first time I had seen like here's socializing 101 if no one ever taught you this. And it was at the beginning like orientation thing. And it was just I wish I remembered everyone's names. But the I was sitting next to someone and doing all this stuff with everyone else. But it was like what to say if you want to sit next to someone and talk to them, what to say when you want to like end the conversation. Then you're like, well, this has been great, and then you get and yeah, like like a few of the people around me were like, oh, who needs it? Like, oh, this is so silly, and like I was. It's hard to describe how over the moon enthusiastic I was about this, but I was like, something about it. I don't know why. I don't really understand my own psychology here and like why this just
Mm.
pushed my happiness button in this very strange
Oh,
way.
great.
But
Yeah.
I was like so overjoyed. I felt so happy, and like the whole rest of that event, it just became this really funny meme to like be done with the conversation. And like this has been great, and like just all of the little like jokes behind
Yeah.
it and stuff. I had such a wonderful time with it, and so I saw you did that like school for socializing, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I want to see in the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, so and I say that because like a lot of the story of these four events for me was like learning how to like re-socialize in the world as a new person after the changes that I had went through, because like I was living, early 2019, a very, 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 very different life than the one in 2021 or two or whenever the first Vibe Camp was. And I'd been working from home and stuff. Like it was just everything was so different, and I'd moved multiple times, and I was just kind of out in low cost of living territory, and I didn't know how to really relate to people as this new person I had become, and it was very challenging. And I remember the first Vibe Camp, I it was like I kind of felt like if the old listeners will remember this, but when you had a DVD player and the screen went to sleep, um, the little like icon would do this thing where it like wandered and bounced and then like
Hmm.
slowly bounced to another side of the screen and then bounced off the other side of the screen, and like and that's what I felt like. I was like just walking a lot, and I didn't quite know who to talk to. I was a lowbie. I've had like four or five different Twitter accounts, so I've always kept it pretty low. And I knew Deep Fates and some people in our group chat, and had a few other friends besides, but nobody that I was really close to other than this small group of people, and didn't quite know how to open up to these random internet people that I didn't know. And so I did this wandering, and it was kind of sad. I called my girlfriend a lot, and
Oh.
it was nice,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit lonely. And then the next year, I was a little more ready, and this was the one where I signed up to do poetry, and I was like, okay, if I like kind of do my like little ping pong lemur thing, that's fine, but I'm gonna pop out and I will write a couple poems at least, even if I'm, like anonymous, that'll be worth
Yeah.
it. And so I had kind of a similar experience, was a little bit discombobulated, and then had to kind of work up the nerve, and was really inspired after that play, which I really enjoyed. The long like surreal dream play kind of got me going, and then I popped out and I had this amazing time writing poetry, and it was I finally had fun at Vibe Camp when I decided to make something of my own and create my own event and take ownership of it, and that was what made the difference. That's what makes it
Yeah.
a really good time, is when you create your own thing there. Um, but yeah, and then like it lived on because people were talking about it afterwards, and so like people got to get acquainted with my writing in this really interesting, surreal, like amazing way, and that felt really good. And then I was like fully charged up for the next couple events. So at Vibe Clips, I had like this peak experience that was just transformative and truly wonderful for me, because I think in some part, like when I touched down, I was like, this time I'm going to try like really being open and like really trying to talk to people that I didn't know, and like flex this muscle of this new person I was, and like try and make friends now. And I had seen people enough, and a few people knew me, and so it was a little easier. But it all worked, and like I think that might have been part of why I was so thrilled by like the how to talk to people, or leave a conversation or whatever. And like it was like, okay, I'm in this sandbox and I know the rules and I'm ready to play the sandbox game, and now you're off. And yeah, it was just like peak. I was so connected to so many different people. I was plugged into so many different events. They did this like am in AI now, and they did this AI talk, and so we had this wonderful like salon type conversation. It was much like philosophy conferences in the past that made me really happy. So I really felt like I belong, and then especially at the after party. Because there are a lot of like events after the camp ends where people have a couple days before they like fly out or whatever. But we went to this little like bar cafe type place in Austin on the way out, and it was just like I had the time of my life. I was telling Booty and Hap old typewriter stories, and we like they were telling me stories of their days, and like it was like just a peak experience truly. And then this past year was like. I went so hard. Like, so I brought my girlfriend with me, now my fiance. And so I was like trying to prep her. She's not online at all. And I was
Yeah.
like, you know, here's what to expect, I guess. I don't know if this is going to work. Like, I was like nervous pulling up. I didn't know how all these pieces of my life were going to fit together. And she had this incredible time too. We both had like just a joyous, like wonderful experience that brought us closer together. She had like wonderful experiences on her own while I was out writing. Our little friend group sort of blossomed, and we had this like tight knit little mesh of people. She ended up doing this sort of like primal movement meditation therapy event that Booty put on, and said it was like one of the most incredible experiences of her life. So we had like an amazing time. Then at that time I did like several events. So I did the poetry for much longer. I did it for like 2 days and was just like grinding, which was really cool. And then I also did like this talk. My partner and I run a mushroom farm together at our house, and so we brought like all of our mushroom bags and like some mushrooms for people to eat and stuff, and gave them this grand tour of like mycology and whatnot. So it was just like a blitz. It was nonstop activity, and yeah, it was like I think I can relate to the organizers after that one a lot, because it was like this is like a white knuckle, like roller coaster, and then it's done. Like, holy shit! I could have taken time to breathe, maybe, but it was still like lovely and wonderful.
I kind of teared up a little bit during some of that. That was,
Aw.
thank you.
Yeah.
It makes me especially happy because starting out with Vibecamp, we weren't sure if we could ever really grow beyond people who know each other on Twitter. For the first couple, I think it was hard for people who like just happened to hear about it from a friend or who didn't know anybody, even people who are on Twitter but maybe don't have connections.
Yeah.
It was pretty hard. It's I think that there is some truth to the, when people complain about clickiness, but I think also a lot of it is just like we're kind of a lot of introverts, and
Yeah.
like, these big intense things are hard, and you gravitate towards the people you already have relationships with, and it is exclusionary in that, but it's not sort of in a mean way. It's just like I need to protect my energy right now. And so there was, a period of time where I was like really not sure how well, like, sort of outsiders, you want to call it that, or just new people would be able to integrate. But I think that 2024, we saw a lot more of, and I heard people telling me, like, I will bring my real life friends now. Like, this feels like a place that they can have a good time. And I'm really happy to hear that about your partner.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, we loved it. And it almost reminds me when you say clickiness, the thing I thought of was like how scary online dating feels. Like
Yeah.
you're like, I don't know this person. I just know, and like scale that up to like 1,000, like multiply that
Yeah.
by 300 people. And like, yeah, of course you're gonna be on guard naturally. So it's like, yeah, it's something that I think the event has done a great job of like being proactive. Like you need to work to get over that because it is like a natural limit that's sort of baked in. But yeah,
Yeah.
I have experienced that limit being surpassed now, have made new friends, and
Oh, that's so
it's even
great.
more special for how like adventurous and weird it is. It's more valuable, I think, than if it wasn't, challenging.
Well, so that's interesting. So I think, and we'll come back to network societies also,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
we have some chatting to do there. But
Yeah.
so you did not go to network society camp, right?
No, no, I wish I did now. Yeah. If that happens again, we will send a delegation, I think. Yeah.
we'll see. That one was challenging for a number of reasons. I think I underestimated because Vibecamp we worked pretty hard from the very beginning to start to build up systems to make each event like a little bit more automated, a little bit less manual work, and it's starting like there are still some like big classes of things we need to figure out, but a lot of it is there are lots of things we're just not thinking about anymore. So I sort of underestimated how hard it is to spin up an entirely new event concept. So that one ended up being challenging, but one of the people who put it on with me, Zach Anderson, has done a lot of work in bringing together kind of like different orgs across an industry who normally don't talk to each other that much, and he ran, I think it was actually just called Cohere, like a series of events that were all about building relationships, and he's got this. What I having a hard time with words lately. It's an exercise, I guess, where you go. It's called True Stories, and you break people off into groups of 3, and you have them take turns. They tell their entire life story in 10 minutes, with no one else talking, and then the listeners have 2 minutes after that to kind of share reflections back at them. And by the time you get to the third person, people like each person like is a little bit more open, a little bit more vulnerable. By the time you get to the third person, you are often like sharing some really, really intense things. And that one we did at Network Society Camp, and I think it went a long way towards helping build a sense of coherence among attendees, because we had teapot people there, we had VCs there, we had network state people, and then we had the Network Nation, more like Ethereum regen type people, like a lot of different groups that don't have a lot in common with each other. So we were kind of going into it like, how is this gonna go? Yeah. But I mean, people just went into it with this sense of like connection, and they had a couple of people that they had like, they hadn't known before, but now, you kind of know somebody's journey, and it, same way it was really powerful for me to hear your journey. Yeah. And then going into an event like that, we did it at School for the Socially Inept, and I have some learnings that I've taken from that, but I really want to try it at Vibecamp. I think that. So I'm curious if I think that that's probably just going to be a net good, and like there's still lots of things challenging about Vibecamp, and I'm kind of, this is actually something I was thinking of when you were talking about Burning Man earlier, is I almost feel like Vibecamp, there's not everybody, but I think it's particularly attractive to people perhaps like us who have already experienced a lot of the hard edges of life, and like I think Burning Man is really helpful for people who kind of haven't, because you can prove to yourself that you can handle these things. But like for those of us who have already proven to ourselves that we can handle that, like I kind of just want to go hang out with my friends, and making relationships is hard enough in a lot of cases. So that's I feel like. Anyway, that was a lot of different, very fragmented thoughts, but just things I was thinking about as you were speaking.
Yeah. No, I relate to that a lot too. I think like it's almost like quiet time can be harder than loud time. And Vibecamp is a form of quiet time a lot of the time. And yeah, like few things can be scarier than meeting strangers from the internet who you don't know. So yeah, I'm fully down for doing it this style over. I've never been to Burning Man, just to clarify. But yeah, no, I totally relate to that. I think like being able to learn more about like random people that I didn't know is like the next frontier of Vibecamp for me. I feel like I've had like lots of different styles of Vibecamp. Like I had, full lemur experience, I feel, the first time. And then the second time, like this kind of middling, like not quite sure, but lots of very big pluses. And then the third time was like, I'm going full blast. I'm doing all the things. I'm like blasting off. And like now I think it's like, I want to see who I can learn about. I think like one of the things that I really liked, that I really respect in people is like, showing kindness to the people who are really nervous and are really like haven't had much experience at all, and maybe they're still the only weird person where they're from, and they haven't really had the physical experience of being with people like them. And like like a friend of mine, Rod, at the last Vibecamp had like a hat that said "I love lemurs" on it, and like people like that, people that are like going out of their way to show kindness to people who might be fucking terrified of Vibecamp, which I think there are a lot of people, and who are still like trying to find any sense of connection in society at all in these times. And Vibecamp is like their best shot, but they still don't know how to do it. I am kind of motivated by the thought of that, and this institution helping people do that who can kind of feel like they're on the fringes a lot of the time.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. That's one thing that we always tell our volunteers is to a large part of their job is just like walk around and see if people feel left out. But it is kind of tricky. We also warn them like some people are going to be just sitting under a tree because that's where they want to be right now, and they just like they're doing emotional regulation work. So like you kind of have to have be a little bit perceptive to figure out like who is over there because they're terrified versus who is just like, oh, I need some time away from people.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, not easy to figure out for sure. Yeah, I like that. Like I know when I'm in Vibe Camp that I've been given appropriate containers for everything. Like the low stimulation like tent or whatever. Like we would make a lot of jokes about the low stimulation environment tent. But like it's just reassuring to know that like people have thought through each different like thing you might need over the course of the weekend, you know.
Yeah.
So just knowing that stuff exists a lot of the time really helps me relax. I know the people that run this event, you know, care about me and about my friends and about everybody there. So it really does help in loosening up. It's still like challenging, but
Yeah.
it certainly helps.
Yeah, so that's one of the questions that I have on my prompt list here. What you know, and well, okay, hold on. Let me say the question first, which is something like, what do you see Vibecamp becoming over time, like 5, 10, 20 years from now? And the reason why I thought of it is because our like the low stimulation tent that you mentioned, for anybody who has not been to Vibecamp, it's it's very janky. It's very janky. We haven't figured out like a great system yet for like having people there all the time, how we're gonna like sort of really make it like an integrated part of the experience. But I can see that being something, you know, we do try to iterate every year. We try to make everything just like a little bit better than it was the year before, and we have a long way to go with lots of things. But I'm imagining a future where, you know, maybe this is like a built structure, or, you know,
Yeah.
because
Right.
I don't know if you know this, I think I've talked about this on some videos before. The site will let us build permanent structures. I want to be a little bit careful about that and not leave them sort of broken things
Right.
or things that are kind of janky. But
Yeah.
where, yeah, so I'm curious, like what do you see? What's your ideal future vibe camp if it keeps
Yeah.
getting better every year? What does that look
Yeah,
like?
that is a wonderful question and a fascinating one. My mind is like going in a few different places at once. I think if I sat down and thought for a while, I could have even more to say. And yes, an amazing question. So where I initially went was like how I would group the various events that take place now that I have had like wonderful experiences with would be like there are sort of like these seminar type like conferencey talky type discussion group things on like niche internet interests that like we're all super nerdy about and you finally get to meet your like tribe of nerds on, and that's one really great thing, and that could kind of blossom into its own little domain. And then there's this through line from all the events I think of like this experimental like immersive theater thing that keeps happening where like there's like this alternate reality gaming like interact with the
Yeah.
play that's going on, and like that keeps happening, and I love stuff like that. And so much so that, you know, in the planning chat like I mentioned, I was like wondering how I might, you know, help create something for it next time. But yeah, I think like that through line of like experimental like hypermedia, like LARPy, you know, all encompassing like play type stuff. Like having one of those each year and scaling that up and bigger and bigger is exciting to me. Um, and then there's that like dance party element. But then like I think so to go back to what you mentioned about Burning Man, which I agree with, is that like to remove the sort of like rugged frontiersmanship of it all and just be like, okay, you're at like a kids summer camp, you're definitely going to survive. Like, but then asking, you know, what does it look like to like build a parallel society? What does it look like to like experiment with like, you know, I know a lot of people involved in Vibe Camp were also involved with like Zuzaloo and like other type of like pop-up cities or pop-up villages of sorts. So I'm also very excited about that. I think like to see like Vibe Camp become not necessarily, you know, we're like crash landing on the Martian desert, but like we're at a safe place in a summer camp with a cafeteria in it. But we're gonna build this like model village, you know, and like we're going to try and experiment with how it would feel to live in like this sort of, you know, more utopian like town environment where you live near all your friends and you share, you know, the vitals of life with each other and stuff. So like kind of like a pop-up community of sorts. And yeah, like obviously the idea of building things on the property is super exciting. Hasn't been used as much as it seems like it could be for reasons that you stated, which make perfect sense. But yeah, like building out Vibe Village, and then people doing Lord knows what with it over the year, and then coming back and re-inhabiting it and fixing it up more, and just having it be this sort of like eternal pop-up city with those different elements in it. A salon, an immersive LARP theater, whatever else, dance party thing. Yeah, all very exciting.
So I wasn't intending to take the conversation here at all, but so I have been, kind of tying back to the conversation of like, how do I grow Vibe Camp? So we've built this really cool thing. We have kind of like a brand, we have some like amount of trust in people or with people, and what do I do with that? We could keep running just Vibe Camp every year and kind of just make that our sole focus. I don't know that we're going to see. I don't know that it's possible to grow at like a crazy high speed and maintain the vibe. So I kind of like our pace of like growth, and like we're really like solidifying things, I think, as we grow. But so a couple ideas that I have been turning around, and I was actually going to mention this after the call, because I talked about like starting a nonprofit in that interview, and now that was like months ago, and I'm like, okay, I'm probably not going to do that. But some of my other ideas. So really early on in Vibe Camp, we were kind of like talking about how it would be cool one day to buy bare land somewhere and have each event be we're building a little bit more of this thing,
Yeah.
which I still think is really cool. That's a lot to take on.
Yeah, for sure.
But then there's also are you familiar with the Borscht Belt?
No.
So I only heard about it because I watched some of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I think it does a really great job. It's a fairly minor plot point in it, but so there was this area of resorts in the Catskills where Jewish families would go in the like mid 1900s every summer, and you grew up with the people. You go in every summer, you met the same people, you found your wives and husbands there. They had entertainment for kids, they had entertainment for adults, they had all of these things.
Yeah.
And it actually had a pretty massive impact on culture. A lot of people don't know about it, but a bunch of famous comedians, Rodney Dangerfield, a bunch of other people got their start in the Borscht Belt. They would do these comedy shows every summer.
Oh my God.
And it became a thing because the Jewish people weren't allowed at other hotels. So they had to go somewhere else. And once airlines became a thing and anti-Semitism cooled down, it kind of just dispersed. But there is sort of a model for a temporary, like, and it really, I feel like it hits a lot of the boxes that the people talk about wanting with like churches and things like that, like full family, and so I'm thinking like, what if we bought an existing retreat center somewhere cheap, maybe like Mexico or the Bahamas or something, and had it be like mostly tourism around the year, but like 3 months, maybe for snowbirds. A lot of people live in pretty cold places, maybe over the winter, 3 months where this is a sort of permanent pop-up city place. You'd really want the same people coming back every year as much as possible, because you want those relationships built over time. But you could make it kind of like what the Borscht Belt was, but with more of the tech focus in addition to the other things. You have entertainment, you have movie nights, you have dance parties, you have things like that, crafts and stuff, but you also have maybe a co-working space, people can give talks. I'm sort of really interested, and I had been looking into this, thinking about this idea for a while, and then I found a retreat space in California, which was like $10 million, but it was owned by a sex cult, and just the memes alone would have been so great, but then I kind of like, that's an insane amount of money for like something that I haven't put that much thought into, and then my life got really busy, and I stopped thinking about it for a while, but that's sort of one of the directions I've been thinking with, that could be a way to make, to grow in a different way than just making our main event bigger every year.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think of that.
first place my mind goes when I hear that is, so I mentioned that I had spent some time at Tassajara, which is like one of the first Zen Buddhist monasteries outside of Asia in the world. I
That
think
was when you were the pool boy?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I worked the pool, and that really like explains kind of everything I'm about to say. But so they have like a schedule that changes throughout the year, and it's this beautiful place. I mean, it's like living in like a Disneyland conception of a medieval Japanese village. It's like
Whoa.
utopia. It's fucking gorgeous. We're in Big Sur, so it's like the prettiest landscapes on the planet, and so their business model is very effective. I mean, they continue to survive. It's been around since the 60s, and they bring people on. The way I got there was in spring, and I was a like work assistant for their work period, where they specifically come to do like construction work, refurbish things, fix the sheds, and do kind of like general handyman work of the kind some random 28-year-old vagabonding around the country might just show up and start doing, right? And so I was there and working, and then once that work period ended, they did all summer. They were a resort, and it was like a luxury spa, and everyone who lived there was more or less like an employee at the spa. A lot of perks, weren't paid, got to eat all their food, got lodging taken care of, whatever. Like high quality of life. And you just, you got assigned different tasks. I worked by the pool, and so I swept the pool up every day. I did little chemistry experiments to make the water clean, whatever. And just like they were running their resort, and it was a practicing Zen Buddhist monastery at the same time. The monks are on the same schedule. The monks are on, if you work there, if you're the pool boy or work somewhere over the summer, you do the same schedule. You wake up super early, you meditate 4 times a day. Um, but it's a resort. You're running the resort. And then they have these like intensive periods in the fall and in the winter that are called practice period, where they shut everything down. And then it's like hardcore monk time. And like we're just kind of living off of what we made over the summer, and doing like really intensive, serious Zen practice. And it's like not open to the public anymore. So an interesting model. It feels like
Yeah.
it's some overlap there with the Borscht Belt concept. That yeah, seems like people have been able to find viable ways to keep things like that going,
Do
especially
you
with the
have
power,
a hmm?
especially just like with the like. So I feel like one part of that equation is that like what they are offering to people who come to visit is, on the one hand, it's kind of a resort. On the other hand, though, it's like we have these people living a particular kind of life. We have this particular worldview that we try to embody in how we act and what we talk about. And, we have like retreats where people can come do some very special yoga or meditation practice or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's like there's some offering that residents there can offer to people who come to visit that are a result of the way that they live. And so I think like that would not be hard for people in the vibe camp scene to find what they could offer that was like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Part of the draw was the different culture that you go be immersed
Mhm.
in,
Yeah, yeah,
which I
exactly.
yeah, which I think is one of the draws of Vibecamp. What do you? So I'm just curious if you had like kind of a body reaction to that version of not it wouldn't be taking the place of Vibecamp, but in addition to Vibecamp, was
Yeah,
there?
I was thinking how I could move my 2 dogs and 2 cats there.
Great.
Yeah, yeah, down. Into it. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like it would be a challenge. I'm curious how you could start small. Like, what would be the intermediary step between Vibe Camp and a 3-month Vibe Village? And then I guess the other thing I lit up when I heard you talk about the like specifically coming to like build or do some kind of
Yeah,
construction-y type labor. I
yeah,
think like that lights me up, and it lights me up for a few different reasons actually, which are interesting to unpack. One is like as a young person, I think some of my few happy memories from like that particular band of like early puberty. We had like a church camp that we would go volunteer at, where you would do essentially like Habitat for Humanity style stuff for people in the area, and they'd show you how to do basic, fix a hole in drywall or whatever, right? And I always felt, and you all stayed in the same area while you did it for this week, as like a 13, 14-year-old. And it was really transformative and nice to get that experience of labor, working with your body, all of these kind of things that you don't get a lot of the time in our world now. And like part of me has had as one of my goals over the next couple of years, and I think this will probably resonate with people, of like wanting to do Habitat for Humanity more often, or wanting to like volunteer and learn carpentry or learn a physical trade. A lot of people in tech right now are eager to try and learn a physical trade, and like it's a good way to prepare for like maybe home ownership one day, or just being able to kind of handle things. So like yeah, learning like some kind of show up and expect to work, and then it's like it also relieves you of the pressure to like have fun at all costs, and like the only reason I'm here is to like party it up and have fun. Like you can have fun a lot easier, I think, at times when you have like a job that you're already doing that is sort of taking most of your attention, and then like fun is this sort of
yeah,
epiphenomenon that happens downstream of it.
yeah. Some of the things that really attract me about the building thing, idea. And there's just a couple of routes. Like we could build things that are kind of for people who are hosting events to use. Leave it there as a gift for other events. Then we come back year after year, and you can be like, I made that. Like I remember, when I like hammered in this nail wrong or whatever, or so and so taught me this thing I didn't know. But then there's another route where I actually just wrote down in my notes, I should ask Bramblewood if they have projects that they kind of like have on the back burner that might work for attendees to do. And maybe that's a way to kind of like get that energy going. But I always wanted to go work at Ren fairs when I was a kid, because it's the idea of like having those people that you're camping out with. It seemed way more fun to me than the actual event itself. And like, you're kind of like on the inside crew. And so we can come 3 days early, and with up to 10% of our total attendee count. So if we have 800 people, we can have 80 people there for 3 days, just getting it ready for everybody else. And that just seems so satisfying to me of like, we're I do come there early, but a lot of it is sort of like I am doing customer service on my computer, or I'm doing this or that. But the idea of like, we're just out there and we're building and we're setting it up. And Burning Man is really great for this. I've been once, and I was there for Build and I was there for Strike, and it was just phenomenal to watch the city. Like every day you'd go like ride your bike around, and like there's more on this road than there was the day before, and just watching it being built around you. There's something really special and hard to replace about that. So I am, I don't know if we're going to be quite there for this year, but if anybody listening wants to help me sort of lead the charge on figuring out what it would take to build stuff and get people coordinated, I think there'd be a lot of excitement for that. I think a lot of people just aren't quite sure what they should build, but I'd be very, very happy to work with somebody to try to figure out what we could do as kind of like a starter.
Yeah, no, there's so many interesting things to do there. Because like if you had like one seminar this year planning for years to come that was just like, DIY construction for dummies or something like that, where like people can get comfortable with the idea of like, and you'll build your own tiny little like, stepping stool here on this plot of land, like just like giving people like an inroad to start building more stuff. Yeah, I'd be excited about all of it.
Yeah, somebody also had the idea of making, I'd love to see more art there too. And just in a general, another ask, like I think that we have the tech set very well represented there, and we're going to be stronger as an event as a whole if we have more sort of, just art and culture and things like that. And so somebody had the idea for building sculptures, and one of the sculptures he was talking about building was Visa's domino meme in real life, which I think is just like so perfect, because so much of what has grown out of this scene like really started with Visa laying just so much groundwork for everybody else.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, all very exciting. But yeah, I would love to be looped into these Vibe Village conversations. We have some overlap in our various projects on that as it is. So very cool.
Yeah. So I think that's a great segue. Why don't could you share a little bit about like when you got into sort of network society, network state, and maybe I think a lot of people still don't even know what those are. Maybe talk a little bit about how you define them and kind of what your trajectory was there and how you think about them now.
Happily, yeah. Okay, so let's start with trying to define it, and I'll just say how I came across that phrase and what my reaction was to it first. So when I first came across concept of like a network state was it was much like the time that I was describing when I was trying to find out where I could fit in on the internet, like Rome Research Hackathon type era. I also came across an event that I think a lot of people in Teapot are familiar with, Interintellect, which is like this remote sort of like salon conference type, like Zoom conferences that people will put on, and then everyone can have this sort of high-minded discussion about them. Replicated a lot of stuff I loved about academic philosophy back before I took leave of that world. One of the guests they had on was Balaji, who's I think the inventor of at least that particular phrasing of the idea. But I actually write about this in the preface to Concept Zine, which is my own little art collective that I do with some friends, where we try to envision different modes of network states or societies. But what I wrote about it was that it's like loosely defined. It's just purely an attempt to like rethink from scratch what governance might mean in a world post-internet. And so that is a blank canvas, intentionally it's very wide. Some people I think conceive of it as like what a nation might be if it was not geographically centralized, i.e., there are people all over the world who log into this one particular website and they belong to something like our country. What that looks like in practice, I think, very much remains to be seen. At concept, I think we're kind of picturing it as something like a like civil service as a service, like a subscription sort of mutual aid society. We're still fleshing it out and trying things, but different people have a lot of different ideas. Other people, I think eventually we'll raise funds in a decentralized manner and then buy our own plot of land somewhere. Other people are doing like startup cities, which is a very closely related concept, where people are building, like Prospera are building actual little cities, where like-minded people can come join them. So many different ways to look at it. I think the blanket term that I would believe about network states that defines it well is like, yeah, just this attempt to invent a post-internet form of governance that sort of fits our times better than the existing solutions that we have. So yeah, I came across it from a Balaji Inter-Intellect that sold out well before I had the chance to attend the talk, unfortunately. But where I also have done a lot of thinking about what excites me and why I'm into this idea in the first place. And I think so the main one is this very transformative experience I had in fourth grade. And so in fourth grade, every Friday I would go to this enrichment center where we do like these fun kind of things. And for all, or at least a big chunk of fourth grade, I have since tried to find like people at this school and called them like, do you have these lesson plans? I really want to look at them. I can't find them. But basically what we did for this extended unit was we LARPed settling an alien planet. And at the beginning of the unit, the teacher had this hat with all these different slips of like planetary features. And you would see like the other periods before you had like stuff up on the wall and it'd be like, our planet is a rocky mountain surface with large docile birds and blah, blah, blah. And ours, like we pulled atmosphere rich in nitrogen, and the planet we called Nitropia. And for like the next like whatever, 8-12 weeks, we like colonized, settled, built a government on Nitropia from nothing. And so it was like we designed our own flag, we wrote a bill of rights, we had like an engineering unit where like me and my dad made like an aqueduct out of toilet paper rolls and like cut them in hot glue gun them and like this is how we would set it up. And like it was like the most involved and like immersed in something I felt in my entire life, like to this day. It was like the most fun I've ever had. And I think like when I hear these ideas that people are having now of like, instead of like engaging with politics as it is, which is like extremely depressing, extremely like rolling a ball up a hill, to just wipe that slate clean and have this kind of beginner's like child mind and be like, okay, we have incredible tools, incredible power at our disposal with the internet and all of the technology that we have nowadays. What would it look like if we just, if we did a Nitropia type, or if we just kind of started from scratch and just kind of invented this stuff as we go on our own, on like a blank piece of paper. And so I feel that like creative resonance when I encounter this idea. So that's what excites me personally, I think. And then, yeah, it's sort of like has really spread in a lot of different directions. It's hard to know if other people are excited about it for the same reasons you are all the time. I think you alluded to this talking about the camp, which is that it's you kind of see lots of different motivations and lots of different ideological stuff involved. I think now network states are starting to have more of like public recognition, which is like creating a new form of ideological baggage. Like people are projecting onto them certain ideas that may not be there. So it's like it's becoming this big morass and very thorny, complicated subject. Yeah, but for me personally, it's quite simple. I just want to recreate how I felt when I was this little kid, getting to just sort of leave my everyday world and imagine something completely new and build something with a group of people in this very new, positive kind of creative way.
That is so wholesome. I
Yeah,
love
right.
that. I love that so much. And what
Yeah.
a cool thing to have a fourth grader do. I would have, yeah, I think we need more world building. There's so much that it stretches so many different kinds of muscles.
Yeah.
How cool.
Yeah, I loved it too. Yeah, like I said, I tried to find them, and I wish if anybody listening knows the old donation center in Virginia Beach, try and find circa 1995, 6, 7. I need to find those things.
Yeah. Wow. And so you've mentioned concept a couple times. Can
Yeah.
you tell us what concept is?
Yeah, happily. So, Concept Country is this like kind of network state experiment that I've been doing with some friends of mine. It's sort of anarchic. No one person is necessarily in charge. But yeah, the origins of it were like many good things I've found in my life. It started just purely as a joke.
Yeah, I think I
Just
remember when it yeah,
yeah,
when it started.
yeah. So it's I've found I think over time with creative projects, it's like once you find the thing that like feels like a joke and feels like you're cheating, but you're having a lot of fun, like
Yeah.
you should follow up on that and keep doing it. So that's kind of where it started. But yeah, so there are. Let me think about how to phrase this. So like I said in my last comment, like there are a lot of different attitudes that are motivating people into this idea of like how could we invent a new form of government, and there are almost you might say like as many different imagined network governments in the making as there are political ideologies in terra firma today, right? And so I think there were some random anons on the internet, some people that were ripe for a little satire, very self serious and kind of like mean and sort of exclusionary in their attitude.
Yep.
That my friends and I thought were funny and might be worth yeah poking fun at a little bit. And so concept originated as that, like this sort of Twitter account that was mocking this very like self-serious kind of want to make like an ideologically and ethnically pure idea of what's on. No way, we're gonna just make our own version of that then, and you're not invited to it. And so it started as that, and but it started like it was just tweets and like silly tweets at that, and then a few things happened that kind of made it pick up steam. We had a group chat where we started thinking about making a zine, natural first thing to do. I have made many zines in the past, and so it was like, oh, great. Like, I just want some friends to write with. Like, that's enough to keep me there and contributing and working. But then this other thing happened that really, like, kind of shook things up. A friend of mine who's known as Somewheresy on Twitter, is this very gifted hacker, very gifted programmer, and he came across this repo basically that allowed you to make an AI agent on Twitter that could reply to people and talk to people and trade cryptocurrency, do all this wacky stuff. And all of a sudden, we kind of watched as like this project went like stratospheric before his very eyes and created this whole I don't know much about crypto, haven't interacted much with the crypto ecosystem, but it created this like mushroom cloud of like activity all around him and around this idea of AI agents that would do these different things. And it kind of like wove itself together with this network state idea that we were having in a lot of very interesting ways. A lot of people involved in crypto are also involved in network states, and there are some interesting overlaps there, interesting potential there. But yeah, it like brought this parody, very small Twitter account that was just purely for our jokes. It brought it under the radar of like a ton of crypto people looking for trading on meme bot kind of action. So all of a sudden we had this like sort of weird spotlight on us, right? And it was people that were kind of like primed to think about network societies because
Yeah.
crypto is kind of adjacent to it. So yeah, then it was like, oh my God, well now the joke's kind of real. So what are we gonna do? And so we kind of like I think everyone eased out of the meme bot thing. It was just this insane explosion that happened. But now we stepped back and we're like, okay, well if we did take this seriously, like how would we make a kind of network state with the same values that sort of motivated our original jokes, which is that like we shouldn't have like a rigid ideology or some kind of like exclusionary elitist kind of attitude. If anything, it's like more of the attitude that you find in Vibecamp that we'd want to embody in like a network state, whatever that might mean. Very open to all kinds of weird people, very like accepting of like people who present differently or want to experiment with themselves or identify in different ways, like just as big a tent as you could possibly make and as welcoming and pluralist and tolerant as you could bear to be, what would that look like? And so that's the phase we're at now. Our zine, which features an interview with Miss Bic Broman, is coming out hopefully in the next couple weeks. But it has a bunch of different writing exploring those ideas. And then we're also like working on an app where people can kind of try out like logging into to sort of, like I said, like a mutual aid society online for people to kind of like talk and vote together and just generally experiment with what it might look like to build some kind of government on the internet. So that's what we're doing. A lot there.
So many things. One idea that I had while you were talking was, should we have a concept country embassy at Vibecamp?
Yes, it is in the works. Yes, we are thinking a lot about this. Now that we're combining with all the stuff that we've just talked about, I'm like, man, maybe we should like head down to the Home Depot before we get there and start putting things together, you know.
That'd be so cool to have like different
Like
autonomous zones, like
nuts style, like little psychiatry embassy. Yeah. No,
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one thing that also made me really light up while you were talking is the app idea. I have so many ideas, and for like years now have been talking with people, and it's difficult because we just don't have events are not a great way to make money, and we don't, we have some very, very amazing volunteers who are building our platform for us. We're on our second iteration of a ticketing / scheduling platform.
Yeah.
It's in-house. So we have a long list of features, and we are working through the really kind of like basic necessary ones before we can get to the really fun ones that are probably like quite large in scope. But so I am not a Liberland citizen, but I am on the Liberland app. And Liberland, for anybody listening, I'm sure you know who they are, but they are a micronation in contested territory between Serbia and Croatia. And they're just a fascinating group of people. And they have an, oh, you didn't know?
No, I had to write it down. That was amazing.
Oh, yeah. We'll save that for later. But,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, like they're kind of known for like anybody who goes to visit there gets arrested. And I actually met the president of Liberland at Zuzalu, and he pitched me on hosting a vibe camp there, and I decided to not move forward with that for the aforementioned you get arrested by Croatian police every time you go thing. But I got access to their app, and their app is really interesting. It's very service oriented, so you can see, and it actually is kind of a privacy nightmare because it shows people exactly where you are. It's not like, oh, you're in this city. It's like here's your home address. But I can see, I think there are like 3 other people on the app in San Francisco, and it like lists what you could be hired for. So it's in the, I mean, it's not quite mutual aid, but it's in the like, let's kind of like develop, some sort of like economic shared whatever. And I think something like that for Vibecamp would be really cool. I think having your exact location not be visible would be nice. But what if you're traveling to some other country or something and you want to go see if there are any other people in the scene there? It'd be really, really cool to have like a social component where you can just like, pull it up. And I think maybe having something of like, this is what I can be hired for would be cool, because I'm very supportive of people like figuring out how to live lives that are fulfilling and meaningful and also cover their basic needs. Which I think is kind of like a path that a lot of people are trying to figure out right now. But then also kind of like having maybe your values listed, your talking points, like what kind of like really interests you, so you can look at it and be like, oh, that's a person I want to talk to. I think that like that's on my wish list of things, and I think that's also kind of in the network society-ish direction. So yeah, you guys, what are you thinking on your app for features?
Yeah, I mean we're really just making like a laboratory. I think like it's such a wide open area that we just want to like try and get people in after we make the zine that want to experiment and play around and then try as many different things we can, try 100 different models or whatever. But 2 things in particular that we've been planning out. One is there are a lot of people with like an AI background that we hang out with, and so we're very excited about like how to incorporate like various AI models into like an app like the one that you just described, or into like a governance layer of some kind. One of the really fun things that we did in the zine was so a friend of mine, Fred Sharman, who's like one of the members of Concept, is like this space architect, and he works on laws and codes related to the architecture of spaceships. And he has this paper where he talks about the progression of like first you declare your ideals, then you declare rights, then you declare laws, and then you declare codes in the sense of like building codes,
Right.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like it filters down in this way. And so we wanted to create ideals to begin this process for us, and we ended up calling it the Claudestitution. So everybody like brain dumped out, everything that they care about, in terms if they were creating their own, state or society or whatever, what your values, what your ideals are. And there are these big, long, sort of like puked out documents. And we we put them all together and then handed them off to Claude and said, represent all of these equally, cite them and quote them, and then you'll be our final member or whatever. And so that's like this Declaration of Independence style thing in the zine is our Claudestitution. But more things like that. There was like there's a lab that Somewheresy has been working on for AI research, where he's doing this kind of like instruction fine tuning on like government ideas or ideals that are reflected from our statement of ideals. So we're developing this model that can sort of talk in a way that like embodies what the Constitution ideals are, as like this thing to consult in terms of like sketching out, what the next step of that might be, right? What the rights of our society might be. So yeah, like hacking on weird AI projects like that is one thing we're working on. And then the other thing we're working on that I am sort of leading the charge on is a school of some kind. And I remember I have a bookmarked tweet from you, where you mentioned something like this too. Like, is there some educational element to incorporate into like the Vibecamp cinematic universe? And yeah, I've been thinking about that, and we've been working on concept about that. So I've made a lot of experiments with like how to generate courses, how to make cool courses. I spent a lot of last year working on this little school project. I have like a Substack on my Twitter profile about it, but I've tried making this like automated sort of school online with these weird different sort of topics. I really like online courses. But yeah, we're thinking about making like a sort of experimental school for Concept 2, and picking out things that people would be really excited to learn. I'm really inspired by this project, the Fractal University or Fractal School, which is like totally local to New York City, so I haven't been able to like dive into it as much as I'd like to. But they do something kind of similar to what I had been picturing, where it's like everyone involved. If you want to teach a class, you teach yourself the subject as good as you can, and then you present and assign things to everyone else, and everybody kind of does it with each other. And they have really interesting, course ideas, and it covers this very broad swath. They'll have people teaching you like classically how to code and build apps and get a job if you want to, and then you've also got like, how to be like a civically engaged member of New York City. I think that's like a fascinating course to have for someone there. And so lots of different like fun pick your own adventure things. So I thought about like building an app that was like this, where you could just like feed it a lot of information and then like co-create it with an AI, and make like really beautiful, like almost like edutainment style games out of the sources that you give it, and we could kind of cover the topics that are meaningful to us and so on. So those are a couple of things we've been thinking about. But yeah, like I said, it's just we described ourselves as like a permanent hackathon in the zine, where it's just like we're just going to keep trying to make things and see
That's
what
so
sticks.
cool.
Actually, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I really feel like if Vibecamp is going to, if we are going to ever create those kinds of layers for our platform, we're kind of gonna need. I mean, it is technically open source; it's available on GitHub, but like we don't really have a process set up for. And again, we just don't have money to like pay people to review PRs and stuff like that. But I think it needs to be more of a collective, like people are just like coming up with crazy ideas and building them kind of project, which is one thing that I think is really cool about the Zuzalo sort of ecosystem, the pop-up city ecosystem, because they are building things over time, and each event is a hackathon where they go and build new layers on their sort of like operating system kind of.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
This is make yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just like, and that's another place that inspired me with the school idea
Yeah.
is yeah, Zuzulu and Vitalik talked a lot about how like that's like a good organizing sort of like centroid for the whole society is like a school frame of mind and like people teaching to other people and stuff. So yeah, that was
Yeah.
another thing that inspired me working on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh crap, what was I gonna say? Oh, this is making me want to run another version of the Network Society Camp, but
Mhm.
for kind of like people, specifically people in the scene, because that way we were trying to do big tent and bring in a lot of
Right.
different people.
Yeah.
But it would be cool to bring together all the people who are kind of like part of this same like cultural heritage almost, who are
Mhm.
thinking about this stuff, and just have like a small like week or something where everybody can kind of like do this because I had no idea that you guys were working on all this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Oh,
that might
no, we
be
enthusiastically. Yeah. I mean, I'm not far from Maryland, so if you did that again, I'm taking off. But yeah, anywhere, anytime, I'd be enthusiastic
yeah.
about that. I know everybody else in concept would be too.
Okay. About how many people are kind of like part of the concept? Uh,
About a dozen right now. Yeah.
oh,
Uh,
okay. Okay.
yeah. It's a tight knit little crew.
Okay. Well, I'm writing this down. I last year I was like, okay, because I ran four like fairly large scale events, and I was just like, this is not what I want to be doing with my life, whatever. But I am still really interested in having running events that have a purpose of like we are going
Mhm.
to get together and this is what we want to do at the end of it. Maybe it's a blog
Yeah.
post, maybe
Yeah.
it's or just yeah.
Especially like kind of the thing the borscht belt style vibe village thing you were describing. Yeah, like 20, 30 just like heavy hitting people that are really down to like try some random stuff, and then a more structured weekend of like let's simulate it. It might be nice to have a smaller group for something like that.
Okay. Yep, I will start thinking about that because that would
Cool.
be very cool.
Yeah.
Another one that I want to do is sort of I want to so I have a growing number of people I've been collecting that all feel pretty similar to me in that we don't like cancel culture,
Yeah.
but we kind of like there's you need to do something to keep your community safe and like so what do you so I really want to get together a small group of people. This would probably be like less than six,
Mhm.
and just spend like a few days talking about that. And I don't think
Yeah.
you could really come up with any answers, but I think you could maybe start coming up with some questions that aren't really being asked enough right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
neat.
and that's one of the other things that really interests me about the network society kind of direction is like I think that probably at some point on the horizon for our scene is coming up with our own justice system. And
Yeah.
that's a weird word to use for it,
Yeah.
but enough people are coming like running into the same problems over and over that
Yeah.
I think some kind of like I don't know if it's gonna what it would look like if it's like a super organism and they're like membership fees and some of it goes to like your community, some of it goes to the super organism, but where you can like maybe have some set of like kind of basic shared values, whatever governance that people opt into. And then maybe if you can like find a way to make that financially viable, then you can like have like trained experts
Yeah.
who can kind of like help like adjudicate things. It is
Mhm.
just like it is consistently really hard, and not every sort of organizer runs into these problems. But when you do, they are quite difficult, and it's
Oh,
really hard because you are learning with people's lives.
yeah.
Or like do 100 things, or wreck 100 lives as you learn how to like navigate people who have experienced trauma or people who have been falsely accused or whatever it is. It is. And I think I have seen more of this in most other community organizers just because of the scale of Vibecamp and because we sort of sit at this weird place where it's not just an event, it is also kind of a community. And so things become sort of our responsibility that didn't happen at Vibecamp because it's like,
Yeah.
everybody knows each other and all of that. But I think over time, as more and more Twitter camps happen, as they happen every year, and they get bigger, more people are going to be running into the same exact thing as I am. So I that gives me like a real reason to like start thinking a lot more in the network society type direction is like how do we solve for that and like how do you give people a path back in if they
Right.
show that like if they are really trying to like learn accountability and like take responsibility for their actions
Yeah.
and improve. Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, from a certain point of view, it's almost like a lot of cancel culture. Like, I think of, like, I hung out in a lot of anarchist, like, crust punky kind of circles, and like the abolish the police and like anti cop sort of things is sort of the standard operating ideology. And a lot of the times, my comeback, which I think is hard to get a good response for, is like, usually that ends up meaning like you replace the cops with your friends, like, and you guys are on Facebook being cops instead of like the
Yeah.
people that get the wage being cops. And like so it's interesting that like cancel culture, at least in a particular localized form of it, is almost already an attempt to kind of reinvent what it means for
Yeah.
like a community to police itself. So it's already underway. The experiments are already ongoing, and it's sort of like, well, you're still playing with people's lives, and it's still very serious and dangerous, but like it's you can improve on what is presently available to people. Um, yeah, I'm really curious about that too. One of the places my mind went when you mentioned that was, I think you're familiar with the work of Zarina Agnew in San Francisco.
I know
Yeah, like,
Serena is one of my housemates.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Serena has been just I it was moving into the house was like a boot camp in emotional intelligence for
yeah,
me. I just learned so much, and Serena is kind of like the one that I go to when I have these big sticky things come up with Vibecamp. I'm just like, what
yeah.
do I say, or like how do I? They have just been immensely valuable, and I treasure them so much. They're one of
Yeah.
my favorite humans. Sorry,
Oh, that's
I was just excited
awesome.
so he knows who they
Yeah,
are.
yeah. I was a fan of their work when I was in San Francisco. I was kind of on the margins of everything back then, so I wasn't able to really involve myself in much. But I was always a fan of their work, and yeah, I remember seeing like a blog post of some kind, and the idea was this sort of like restorative justice thing. Like it was
Yeah.
during the peak cancel culture, but it was like, how do we get people who have, some kind of like sexual malfeasance back into our culture? People can be healed from these things. They don't, need to be shunned forever or whatever. And I remember thinking like, oh yeah, this is a good model. Like whatever ends up working will probably look something like this, I think.
Yeah, yeah. I would
That's
love
that.
to just be able to like pay pay Serena to be on call sometimes for stuff like that if we
Oh,
could. I don't know. They are a really yeah. Knowing them is really impactful for me.
cool, cool.
Oh. So another thing that I have been thinking about. So my path into and I think maybe I said this in the interview you guys did with me or
Mhm.
maybe we talked about otherwise. But my path into network society space was I remember looking around, and I think I did say this in the interview, but I remember looking around pretty early on before Balaji's book came out when I was like trying to take like a kind of like higher level view of what was happening on Twitter. I saw that like hubs were forming in San Francisco and in New York, and that like people were starting to teach each other things and start businesses and all this, and it was pretty nascent at the time. This was a few years ago, and you just extrapolate that forward and you're gonna I was like, okay, well, more hubs are gonna grow, those hubs are gonna get bigger, people are gonna have more and more ambitious projects, and that has really been borne out. But when Balaji's book came out, I was like, oh, there's somebody else who's thinking about this concept of hubs forming digitally first and then building roots in the real world, and what can that become. And my as part of my continued interest in it is I think that Teapot is the most robust example of a network society
Yep.
in existence. And
Yes.
there I don't know every project, but I don't know about a lot of the projects. I hear about a lot of them,
Yeah.
and just Teapot is, and it's really funny because Balaji's sort of like step by step playbook for it is a little bit different.
Mhm.
You need to have one strong founder. You need to have like a singular principle that everybody kind of rallies around. So there's a bunch of things that just Teapot were like, nah, we're just gonna do nobody set out to be like, I'm gonna found this thing, and nobody, there's no one leader, there's no and the boundaries are really fuzzy, there's no real membership, but there's still a clear sense of like mutual aid. There are kind of economies starting that people are, businesses haven't just been started, people are building culture, people are building scenes, people are helping better each other and help each other get jobs and help each other date, and it's just this really really cool emergent phenomenon. And so I think that's really interesting to me. But then also, how do you take that to the next level? I do think it probably looks more like individual groups within the larger group beginning to start their own thing. I don't know if you've thought about, because I don't know where, I think at some point you're gonna need like a little bit more of directed coordination to
Yeah.
turn that into something that's more in that. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Right. No, it's curious. I mean, I guess the first thing I thought was like, yeah, I think you're right in that like it would be better if there were like 100 flowers blooming of different tries at things that weren't like the official Vibe Camp network state app or whatever. Like that's too much pressure to put on like V1. But I guess the other thing that my mind went to was like I'm thinking back to this idea of like a smaller but more intensive form of vibe camp for people who are serious about this. Like, how could you, almost like a war game, but it's like a state game? Like, how could you dry run it, for a week or even less time and like be like, okay, we're gonna. I mean, I go back to like my experience as a kid, like LARPing the alien planet.
Yeah.
Like that was, it's like, how do you do that on a bigger scale, how could you do that in a way that would like give you data that you could use at the end of it, like an after action kind of brief where everyone could talk about like, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. Yeah, like how could you realistically, pretend in a small container that you were doing something at a bigger scale that would be impacting people's lives? Like, how could you realistically pretend or simulate that? In a way that was like fun and yeah, it was like of use to people. But I think that's where I would go first is like, how do you make, yeah, this kind of like LARP game, like Vibe City, 5 days, serious hardcore applicants only, like because it's going to be kind of crazy, we don't know what's going to happen, and like now we have like an app where it can contain things, and like here's like the village, and we're going to try and coordinate on a larger scale. Like yeah, I mean that's what I think of, but to be honest I have little experience with like what even the nascent versions are. I've never been to Zuzulu or any of those places, so I don't even know what those look like, and maybe there are some obvious mistakes that I would make that I don't know about. So I'm not totally sure. But yeah, I think like simulating or gaming it out first makes a lot of sense.
Whoa. Okay, two things. Well, briefly, that was one of our discarded ideas for Network Society Camp.
Yeah.
We put a fair amount of work into trying to think of for one of the days we really wanted to break people off into groups and have them do world building. What would your network state look like? And we had all sorts of ideas with this where we were gonna like add in like sort of like Greek games type of component where like your different countries like wrestled with each other or like did archery or whatever, and you can get have that and people could make their own flags and come up with songs and kind of do have fun and creative aspects, but then also kind of like think about governance and things like that. But then the other thought, and this may be, I apologize, this may be putting too much pressure on you since we are recording right now, but
Yeah.
do you want to just like plan this out together? Should we just do like concept and Vibecamp collab of like
Wow.
put,
Oh my god.
yeah?
Yeah, yeah.
Ah.
Report to the team. Yeah, yeah. Sounds amazing. I would love to. It'd be really fun.
Great. Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been running into or sort of reflecting on recently is at the start of Vibecamp, it felt just so collaborative because I was going on Twitter, I was tweeting at a big team of people, and we were figuring all these things out, and it just felt like a massive group effort. And we just have a lot of it figured out now. We're not like figuring out how to like what cabins are going to look, it's just, and there are some things to figure out, but it's much less of a massive group project. And I miss the sense of collaboration, and I just like, okay, can you like do this data entry or can you, whatever. It's just like, so
Yeah,
this is very exciting.
yeah, yeah. So down. I know everybody would be really excited to explore that more. Yeah.
Okay, great. I love it. I love it. So we've been on this call for quite some time now. I did want to ask a few questions. You still want to talk about Teapot a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Happy to.
So one of the things I've been doing with these calls, and I don't know if I will ever get around to it, but this way I have the material, is I've been feeling, a lot of people kind of have been grumbling about this sense of the scene changing and not being what it once was, and some
Yeah.
people are trying to do things about it, but I wonder, maybe it is the algorithm. Maybe the scene has gotten too big, too diluted. Maybe there's nothing you can do about it. But I also think that, maybe talking about what ways people really get a lot of value out of Twitter, like how to have a really fun time on Twitter, and kind of highlighting some of that might help. So I'm curious, like what is Teapot to you?
Oh, it's so interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Again, my mind's going off in so many different directions. I like. So obviously, it means in February 2025, if I see a tweet that mentions Teapot, I have no idea if they're talking about my friend group or anyone I've ever met or would vibe with in my entire life, right? So like there is, I think, clearly for me, like something changed. It's not to say it's bad or that like one thing changed. Many things changed. The original Teapot I know is kind of still active. I do think like part of me wonders, it's almost as if like the algorithm under the surface is almost uh like how would I put it, like this thing, like I'm just seeing the shadows on the cave on my feed of the algorithm. I don't actually know what it's doing or how it's deciding. Like, why am I seeing this person now? Why is my For You page looking this way now? It's like I am underground. I don't really get the full picture. So I don't totally know. And I know a little bit more about, like the underlying stuff than most people. So I think most people are kind of in the dark. Not to say I know stuff, but just that like the recommender has been open sourced, and I still feel like I don't understand. Anyway, it seems as though changes have happened that I don't fully understand in terms of who gets shown what, and that has really changed a lot. But I think like the cultural shift, when I see like the new teapot that I don't relate to as much, um, it's like younger people. It's more like male coded. It revolves more heavily around programming in like a way like everyone in it, like Teapot was a very friendly tech place in the past, but like it was this art plus tech energy that seems more like only tech now. So yeah, something has changed. What it was for me when it started as just like a lurker, my very not authoritative journey through it was through like interesting like tools for thought style software, which was like this very reflective like philosophical kind of approach to being a computer nerd, that sort of like went back to the origins of computers and talked a lot about like the first computer inventors like Doug Engelbart, Ted Nelson, people that were like thinking about what it meant to relate to other people and relate to yourself via these devices, and like how that could change our intelligence and change our brain. And it seemed like it was all people who were interested in that and interested in Twitter as this like collective network graph of that, right? Like you mentioned Visa, and I think Visa is like the paradigm of this. Like Visa had this fascinating public notebook that anyone in the world could read, and he's exploring his very interesting mind, and there are all these threads, and they're so recursive, and like and it's public, and it's able to be totally interactive. And like it was like this network graph of like rethinking computers and our relationships to them and how we relate to each other in our time with the information technology we have. So I think that for me was sort of what Teapot felt like early on. And yeah, it was this added element, I think, which is sort of like reflective of how I just tried to describe it, which is like when you laughed when I said like I was a diehard philosophy major and then I took mushrooms, right? I feel like everybody kind of has like a similar element of that. Like it's like the post rationalism, I think, is what people were calling it a while ago, where it's like I have these rational logical tools, and then I also have this side of myself that recognizes that those tools are limited, and usually people have like a psychedelic element to that part of their story. But yeah, it's like the sim cluster kind of changed. How we see each other changed. Some accounts got really big. I think it was like some of the main nodes of the network, some of the community builders accounts got very, very large, which just naturally changes how a person relates to the platform that they talk and interact on because of that. But I think it was like kind of this negative like feedback, like compounding thing, where it was like not only did like the kind of like node or like friend center accounts get big in a way that was hard for them to handle, but the algorithms changes, from what I heard described, were like it sort of like rewards that more. Like it's like less lateral and more like the biggest accounts you are most likely to see stuff from, and it doesn't matter as much the strength of like your lateral connections with smaller accounts. um, yeah, I don't know. I hopefully that kind of touches on what you're looking for.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I remember I got a little bit of pushback when we were first building Vibecamp. People were, I mean, the scene was so small then, and people
Mm.
were afraid of, what if this blows up and we get mainstream attention, and it makes it too big. And I actually think that it was really, really good, because I mean, I noticed a thing after each of the first couple of Vibecamps where I would see people, smaller accounts just get a ton of engagement, and I'd look through at the time. You could see who was liking things, and I remember those people meeting each other at Vibecamp, and
Yeah.
you're just more inclined to like or engage with something if there's a person behind the avatar. And I think that Vibecamp really kind of like I think it did contribute to growth of the scene, because people were engaging with each other a lot more, which meant that accounts grew bigger. But I think it also kind of worked to solidify some of these relationships and make them so that, if we do end up getting to a point where we need to move to a new platform, I know some people are kind of working on trying to build one that's a little bit more gated.
Hmm.
Those relationships carry forward. We really saw that with Blue Sky when Teapot had like its moment on early Blue Sky, where we kind of took it over
Yeah.
for a little bit. I remember VGR, I'm tweeting about it and just being like, "Oh, this is like a real thing. Like you guys just like went over here, like it
Yeah.
just like." And but you know these relationships they're real. Even for people who haven't been to Vibecamp, I think that there's a sense of like we have been a lot of people have known each other for a long time, and there's a lot more just especially in New York or San Francisco, people hang out with each other all the time, and there's just real relationships behind these digital ones, and there's a strength to that, and I think that even if it comes to a point where we do need to move, I think we could,
Yeah.
or some version of we could.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious, like, I think one of the things I'm excited about, like a project that has been really inspiring me lately, is I don't remember this person's actual name, but Zeke, aka like X Genesis on Twitter. Hopefully you know
Chic.
who I'm talking about. Chic.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah.
So I love this person. Every time I've seen him at Vibecamp, we've had like a really friendly, good conversation, and
Yeah.
we vibe. But this community archive project that Chic is doing,
Yeah.
it's almost as if like it's like a visualization of Teapot.
Hmm.
So like for those who don't know, the community archive, I think it's community-archive.org, but don't quote me. Hopefully we can get the right URL. But a lot of big Teapot accounts with lots and lots of posts have downloaded their archive and uploaded it to the community archive site to kind of persist, lots of Teapot posts and the big Teapot network off platform. And a lot of people in on that project. It's like a big open source, very interesting project. Another person who I'm buddies with, who's doing really interesting work, is Defender of Basic on Twitter, who's been doing something called like the Open Memetics Institute, looking at how to relate to people unlike you online, and how to really like suss out a science of memes or whatever. But a lot of the work that they've been doing has led to like creating these kind of like embedded machine learning graphs of like tweet topics and stuff, and you can sort of see like this big three-dimensional cluster. And so like part of what I wonder, and what I think is like an active interesting project area, is trying to get everyone's stuff, get all the content downloaded and off of Twitter, and like feed it into this program, and then at least then we're not like at the mercy of the thing that we can't see and understand. Then you can at least have like the data there and be like, this is kind of our scene, this is kind of a map of it, you know what I mean? Here's who we
Yeah.
might send a blast DM to or something.
This is completely unrelated. It's just something that I meant to say earlier, which is that it's really funny to me now realizing how kind of involved you've been in the network society sphere, that I
Yeah.
happened to use a picture of your typewriter poem in my network state talk without knowing any of that context.
Yeah, so much serendipity. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
was I was really delighted when I saw that for sure.
That talk was funny because I felt a little bit like it was weird to talk about Vibecamp because the especially like I think maybe in the future it might make more sense, but Vibecamp, especially as it was then, was not a network. We weren't claiming anything like that. We weren't working towards anything like that. The thing that really I wanted to talk about was Teapot, and I had 10 minutes, and I wrote so many different versions of a talk show. I'm like, how do
Yeah,
you
yeah.
how do you explain Teapot in 10 minutes in a way that's like going to be compelling on a? So I just ended up talking about Vibecamp, but it was that was an interesting experience. The title, like, oh, I don't actually know how to talk about any of this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Props to them for keeping it at 10 minutes, but I can totally see how that would be maddening. Yeah, very hard to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that was covered most of what I want to cover. I do have one more question, which is, for somebody who's watching this who's never been to Vibe Camp, what are your recommendations? What advice
Okay.
do you have?
Yeah, let me give myself a moment to think about that. So, I guess like, hmm. I mean, I wonder who is seeing, you know, Vibecamp ads or Vibecamp posts, who has never been, but is going to be a first time attendee this year. Like, I wonder what that person's story is.
Yeah.
Um, hmm. I genuinely don't know. I wonder what it's like to be them. I guess like I would say. So okay, so let's assume you're anybody. You're just a person on the internet who wandered into a subculture, and now you've made some friends, and now you see that they're having an event. So there's like one-to-one correlation between how much you add to the event and how much you get out of it. That's, everybody's going to say that, but it's just a rule of the road. The Vibecamp app is very easy to create events on and to find events that you might want to do. So like try and be intentional about giving yourself like a schedule or like a list of things that you want to do. You could still have an amazing time just wandering around and seeing what happens. But given that like it's a unconference festival of internet nerds, like there are a lot of introverts, so it might it might be challenging for you to stumble into a random conversation and have that bear fruit. Not to say that it wouldn't happen, but if you give yourself like a little bit of a list of like, I want to attend these things, and maybe challenge yourself to give one event. I think like, yeah, one thing that I would have been maybe a little intimidated by if I didn't know Vibecamp is like the pressure of creating an event, as if there are these high expectations for me. But I have been to so many Vibecamp events that are literally like the location is like under the tree by the kitchen. You wander over there, it's a bunch of people standing in a circle feeling kind of weird. The person who put it on feeling extra weird, standing and then like finally works up and goes stands in the center and then just starts talking, and then it's out of everyone's hands at that point, and you just ride it out and see what happens. And they've been amazing experiences, so good. So like had these rich, delightful conversations. No one put very much effort into it, and no one had any expectations for you at all. So like the bar for creating an event is much lower than you think it might be. That's my number one advice. And to create an event, so do something. Talk about something you're interested in. Like it's just pick something you're passionate about. Bring a trinket if you can, if you have one. I saw someone do like a presentation on like Stephen Wolfram's computational biology. Brought a little like pocket PowerPoint projector. Did it on Saturday night when everybody was like dancing and stuff.
I didn't even know about that. Oh my God. Amazing.
This is one of my favorite memories. I think it was of the first Vibecamp, actually. Shout out to that guy. Because I don't drink, and so I feel very weird in like party atmospheres, right? I don't really know how to interact. So it was like that. It was my DVD logo Vibecamp, and I was wandering around, and I remember telling my buddies, I was like, it was real Sigma hours, but like the guy had a PowerPoint projector and was like detailed walking through like Stephen Wolfram math biology theory, and like I was like, oh, a kindred soul. Like this, it was just like such balm to my heart, like to like be like totally disconnected from party world. So yeah, there you may be that for someone else if you just very low expectations. Just pick something you're excited about, pick something you could nerd out about and talk for 20 minutes uninterrupted about. It can really be anything. People will give you the benefit of the doubt. People will be excited to come hear from you. People will be excited to be your friend and have a reason to go do something so that they're not wandering around alone. So there's nothing to lose by creating events. Create as many events as you can. That's my advice to a first-time vibe camper.
Oh, I love that so much. And
Yeah, thank you for helping me uncover that memory. That was like special moment to me. It really was.
yeah, it was funny. After the second Vibe Camp, because that was a very intense experience for a lot of people, myself included. I went to an after party in Philly, and I remember stealing this person's bedroom because I just ended up having office hours there because so many people had like really intense things they needed to tell me about, complaints they needed to make. Like I was just like, all right, next. But I remember one of the people who I talked to. I don't think it was in that bedroom, but it was he was displeased at the lack of intellectual content there. And I think for one thing, there is some if you go, if you actually go and try and find it. But another thing, what happens at Vibecamp is what you bring to Vibecamp. I think there are lots of people for whom that is the draw. If you're complaining about it, somebody else is thinking that complaint and they're not telling it to me. So you just got to be the one to bring that there. Like I think that's one of the things that's really powerful. I'm also kind of a true believer in this culture, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that's really, really powerful because we have the rationalists, we have, the heavy intellectual academics, that kind of thing. We have the artists, we have the creatives, we have the builders and the doers, and you need all of those things, And I think if you lean too heavily on any one of them, you lose something very important. And so I think whatever aspect of that really resonates with you, bring that to Vibecamp. Don't just go there and be like, there's not this thing that really speaks to my soul. Bring it because it's going to speak to other people and we need it there.
Yeah, yeah. The great contribution of Vibecamp was like creating the container and creating the very easy to use, very user friendly mobile app where you can literally push a button with your thumb and make an event. So yeah, I love going to these random little like events that it seems like five people will show up to, and I want to see more of them in the world. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
wishing that a
yeah.
lot.
Oh. So if somebody is listening to this episode and really thinks concept is cool, wants to get more involved, is there a path towards that?
Oh,
What would you tell them?
that is a great question. So right now you can we have our Twitter account that you can follow, and I'm sure we're working on a website right now, so there will be like a
Yeah.
place to collect emails and stuff. The website will eventually be live at concept.country, although it's not yet. And at Concept Country on Twitter, yeah, you can follow us, and we'll let you know when there's a place to drop an email or join in a more involved way. And we should be releasing our zine, including an interview with Brooke, sometime within the next couple weeks, hopefully by early March.
Ah, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
This is very nourishing to my soul. Very
Mm.
exciting. And we can circle back and talk about what this like retreat world building thing would look like. I think that's really really cool. And just yeah, thank you so much for volunteering to do
Yeah,
this and for sharing so
absolutely.
much about your life. And I'm so stoked. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, thanks for everything, Brooke. I really appreciate you having me. I had a wonderful time.
Thank you.